Greetings, Starfighters. Before we get into it, yeah, the thing is, I was only out in the sun for about a minute and a half today, the time it took to go across the street from where I live to over here. So, in case you're wondering why I look like this, Irish. Anyway, the next movie, Horror Express. I am still hoping there's a train in this, but looking at the plot summary on the back, I am a little less hopeful about that. Okay, this is really just a bare bones summary, so I may be way off base here, but it looks like what they're doing here is basically just a remake of The Thing from Another World, only in China and with vampires. I mean, again, I could be wrong, but, well, these things happen. Sometimes you hope for something from one of these movies and you don't get it.
Alright, so now I have watched Horror Express from 1972. Plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, but before I do that, a lot of the images you're going to see here will probably give away major plot points of the movie before I talk about them, so if you would prefer not to be spoiled, your best options are to either leave this video running on another tab and just listen to the audio, or watch the movie first, then come back. With that out of the way, an English anthropologist has discovered a frozen monster in the frozen wastes of Manchuria, which he believes may be the missing link. He brings the creature back to Europe aboard a Trans-Siberian Express, but during the trip, the monster thaws out and starts to butcher the passengers, one by one. So, holy shit, I didn't know I was getting another Lee Cushing movie here. Nice. They aren't playing Dracula and Van Helsing, but that's fine. I dig these two actors. I mean, yeah, Count Dracula and his vampire bride was, as I said last episode, a disappointment, but that wasn't their fault. And remember when I said I'd hoped there was a train in this? Well, the first second of the film contains train noises, so, yep. Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and trains. Neat. So, how is the movie itself? First thing of note here is that Lee is not playing the villain. His narration opens the movie in the form of a letter he is writing about the events of the film. There's actually a word to describe this method of storytelling, but I forget what it is, and I'm too hot to look it up. It's late July in Southern California, dudes. You're lucky you're getting 2 episodes this month. This likely means that Lee's character survives whatever horrors are on the Horror Express, but not necessarily. The end of the movie could come after he sends the letter, after all. Anyway, he's writing to some society, I missed the name, about an expedition to China. The story proper starts with Lee's character sporting a most glorious mustache, and an associate exploring a cave and finding a frozen body of something humanoid. Okay, yeah, that part was covered in the plot summary, but I hadn't picked the plot summary yet when I wrote the script, which is how it usually goes. Anyway, we fade out to the body being carted out, and from there to a train that will be the primary setting of this movie. We see Alexander Saxton, Lee's character's name, complaining about the accommodations on the train, like a stuffy British gent. Yeah, I know, the accent was horrible. Now you know why I don't do voiceover work more often. Peter Cushing enters the film at this point as a Dr. Wells, who is apparently fond of Saxton's work in the field of archaeology and anthropology and whatnot, though Saxton's manner makes it clear that the feeling is not mutual. We also meet Wells' assistant, Miss Jones, who works with bacteria. We cut from the train office to a shifty acting Chinese man who distracts a guard standing by the crate, covered in tarps and chains, that has the body that Saxton found. He unlocks the chains, and then after a short scene of Cushing bribing a train official to get his animal cargo aboard, we cut back to the guard coming back to find the chains unlocked and the tarp disturbed and, dun dun dun, the guy who opened the chains dead under the tarp. The plot thickens. Okay, so maybe this isn't going to be The Thing from Another World on a train. It's going to be an Agatha Christie story with monsters. Well, a monster. You know what I mean. Quite a bit is going on in this opening act, so I'm going to have to skim over some stuff, otherwise this portion of the episode alone will take about 10 minutes. But hey, at least it's not boring. I just hope nothing I skim over comes back to bite me in the ass later in the episode. After the trains get rolling, and no, that is not a pun, that's just how trains work, we meet a Scandinavian woman and her dog who is scared of the crate. 1 minute with her in the film and I can tell you 2 things I'm certain will happen. 1, she'll become Saxton's love interest, and 2, that dog will be one of the monster's victims. After this, we get what is probably the funniest line of the movie. It wasn't intentionally funny, at least I don't think it was. It was only meant to highlight Saxton's inherent skepticism, but, fuck, skipping has already bitten me in the ass. Okay, rolling back a bit, there was a priest on the train platform who was acting kind of kooky, and he tried to prove that whatever was in the crate was related to Satan because he couldn't draw a cross with chalk on the crate like he could with the stone ground. Stone ground. Yeah, you know what? I'm leaving that in because I've had to do too many cuts during this paragraph already. Saxton meets an engineer on the train, not too long after this, who managed to get the chalk from the priest. How isn't explained, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. Things being left inferred do not equal plot holes. Somebody needs to tell all the Star Wars The Last Jedi haters on YouTube about that. But the engineer tells Saxton that it was ordinary chalk, and asks how it possibly could have been unable to leave a mark on the crate, to which Saxton says, hypnosis, yoga. I am not kidding. Hypnosis and yoga is how a guy was able to fake chalk not working? What? I had to pause the film at this point because I was laughing so much, and I'm laughing now. That line alone gives this movie points, because, damn, not only is it so stupid as to be funny rather than annoying, but Christopher Lee delivers it with such sincerity. Where was this level of acting in the last movie in this set that he was in? Oh, and wouldn't you know it, Saxton and Wells have to bunk together. But they don't like each other. Oh, the wacky shenanigans that will horror movie. Right. At this point, we cut to a baggage man drilling a tiny hole in the crate to get a peek at what's inside, at the request of Cushing's character, with money involved, of course, as Dr. Wells seems to have only 2 modes, bribery and politeness. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that all the deaths from here on out are Wells's fault. Or are they? Because as we see, the creature escapes by picking the lock. It doesn't hit you over the head with it, but showing this bit establishes that the creature learned how to do this from the guy it killed on the train platform. And we see how it did it when it kills one of the train's baggage men. It kills through the eyes. It basically stares into the victim through direct eye contact, causing them to bleed through the eyes, and then turn completely white. The eyes turn completely white. Oh, wow, my grammar really needs work. I'm so glad you folks at home don't actually get to see my scripts. You would be so ashamed of me. Any English teachers out there would be trying to write in red pen on their monitors. It would just be... Though this does create a bit of an issue, because there wasn't any blood on the first victim of the movie, on his face. Maybe the vampire connection here is it drinks the blood afterwards? And it just didn't do that with the baggage man for some reason? But credit to the movie here, having the sound of the baggage man's whistle being repeated exactly by the creature as an inky black hand and arm open the crate from the inside. Very effective. So maybe it is like The Thing from Another World after all, just with a little Agatha Christie thrown in. By the way, the reason I'm saying The Thing from Another World and not The Thing is, well, that should be obvious. The Thing came out like 10 years after this one, so this one would likely be referencing The Thing from Another World, the movie adaptation of the hideously racist Joseph Campbell's Who Goes There. By which I mean Joseph Campbell was racist, not that Who Goes There was racist. Or maybe it was, I haven't actually read it. Anyway, the priest is on the train now, and I am once again regretting having skipped over so much of the first act. This movie has layers, folks. Why he's on the train does make sense, though. He's actually traveling with a couple that happens to include the Scandinavian woman that Saxton was talking to earlier. The baggage man's body is found when officials on the train notice that he's gone missing, and they bust open Saxton's crate. Saxton at this point has decided that no amount of yoga in the world can explain this, so he immediately leaps to the conclusion that the fossil he found in the ice of an ape-like man must be alive. Did I say that right? I think I did. I have mixed feelings about this. It would be ridiculous for him to be super skeptical through the whole movie, but his turnaround does come awfully fast. Not surprisingly, the officials take him into custody. They also begin a search of the train, as best they can, without causing too much alarm. The level of competency on display here, it's almost like this movie was deliberately placed in the set at this point to counterbalance the sheer dumbfuckery of literally every character with lines, and some of the characters without lines, in the last movie. This does not save one of the guards from being killed, though. We go to Dr. Wells trying to carry on as normally as he possibly can, just not allowed to talk about what he's seen so as not to cause a panic on the train, when he gets called in to examine the body of the soldier who was killed. Oh yeah, it turns out they were soldiers. I thought that they were police at first, but that was my mistake. Here we get another good laugh when the assistant, Miss Jones, re-enters the picture. We haven't actually seen her for a while up to this point. Wells asks for her assistance, and she goes, "Oh, at your age, I'm not surprised," glancing at the attractive redhead that Wells was seated across from at dinner. Wells goes, "No, for an autopsy." It's funnier than I'm conveying it. The autopsy scene itself, well, I won't go into it here. Not that it's super gross or anything, I just don't want to give any neurologists who might be hearing this an aneurysm. I mean, I know very little about the human brain, apart from the fact that the whole "we only use 10% of it" thing is complete bullshit, but I am fairly confident that losing your memories doesn't make your brain matter smooth. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but with or without memories, in real life when your skull gets opened in the autopsy room, I'm pretty sure your brain will still look like, well, what we all pretty much know a brain to look like. The redhead I mentioned earlier is the next to die, killed while she's stealing the Scandinavian woman's jewelry from a safe on the train. Well, I thought it was jewelry anyway, it turns out that it wasn't, but that's a subplot I'm going to actually set aside for now. I'll come back to it if I have to. This brings me to one actual problem I have with the movie. I can forgive the bad science, partly because this is a horror movie, but also because, well, frankly, I've seen worse. But it is disappointing that, apart from Miss Jones, every woman character we've seen so far has been plotting to one extent or another, or at least has seemed to. We don't know what the Scandinavian is up to yet, but she and her husband have something going on, likely to do with the priest. It's not the worst thing in the world, and frankly, on the whole, I think I've seen less sexism in these movies than I saw in more than half the movies in last season's set, but it does bug me. After this, Saxton goes to see the inspector, the sort of head of security on the train, for want of a better phrase, and basically explains to us, the audience, exactly what the creature does, which I've already touched on, the whole stealing memories through the eyes thing. Okay, I am vaguely aware of some vampire stories where the vampire learns about their victims' histories through their blood and all that, but all of those I've seen or read were made after this movie. And also, they got it through the actual blood, not by magically ironing the wrinkles out of the gray matter. Still, I'm willing to allow that maybe this movie does fit in with the vampire theme after all, though it is certainly a stretch. But based on some things that happen with the inspector later, it looks like that eye thing goes both ways, though it's not instantaneous because, while I'm sure his body's been taken over, I don't think he himself realizes it yet. The film itself does confirm this later, when it shows us that one of his hands and forearms has turned really nasty, like the creature's own arms had been. Sadly, my favorite character of the movie makes her exit when the inspector kills her, now being fully possessed by the creature, even having the red eyes. He, for some reason, spares the priest who witnesses this, But it looks like the priest, who was already not that stable when we first met him, has now gone completely bye-bye, following the inspector around like a puppy even after he kills again. Later, Saxton, with most if not all of the train's passengers in the same car now, tells everyone to stay in groups or pairs and that no one should be alone. This is very practical advice. Let's see how long that lasts. And that's about a minute, because one transition shot later, Saxton goes into a small room by himself. That didn't last long even by horror movie standards. But hey, guess who finally shows up? Telly Savalas. His name was in the credits, and you may have noticed his name on some of the posters that have been in the video so far. But honestly, I'd forgotten that he was in this movie until around the hour mark. I initially thought that he was part of a group of people who were planning to rob the train. Even if that had been the case, it wouldn't have been a new subplot. It would have related to what was in the safe that the redhead was trying to steal when she was killed. She was trying to steal steel. Or rather, a special form of steel developed by the Scandinavian woman's husband. In case you're wondering, no, the steel does not actually play a role in defeating the creature at the end. But as for Savalas, it's like, yeah, I know his character has a name, but I'm just going to call him Telly Savalas. I kind of love how his character is supposed to be Russian, but he doesn't even attempt an accent. He just sounds like, well, like Telly Savalas. We cut back to the train, and once again, me skimming over something earlier has turned out to be a bad idea. Normally I don't have this problem on this show. But yeah, TLDR, the creature is probably an alien, and is stealing knowledge that it thinks can help it leave Earth. Which leads me to believe that it crashed here. Crashed alien, frozen in ice for thousands of years, can take over other people's bodies. Yeah, I was right the first time. This is the thing from another world on a train. You know, considering how little I had to go on when I made that assumption, that is a damn good guess on my part. Now, if only I could figure out why the inspector's left hand and forearm, and only his left hand and forearm, look like that of a corpse. And also that doesn't seem to happen to somebody else who gets possessed later in the movie. But, I mean, the inspector wasn't touching the creature when it entered him. If that was supposed to be a visual signifier for the audience, I kind of think that his eyes going red when the lights get turned off would have been enough. But later, while Saxton is info-dumping on us the creature's background, in the form of his theorizing, Wells shows up, and the inspector, trying to deflect possible suspicion, asks, "What if one of you is the monster?" Wells replies with, "Monster? We're British, you know." This was funny. Mostly because of Cushing's delivery, of course. But, I mean, let's be real, there are a lot of people in the world to whom the words British and monster are pretty synonymous. The train stops briefly, and Telly Savalas and his men board the train, and, you know, I can't do this scene justice. If I try to describe just how awesome this sequence is, I'll make it sound lame. I just know I will. I imagine that he was never quite able to get all the bits of scenery out of his teeth after filming this. It's a shame that Savalas never got to play Lex Luthor, because I bet he'd have crushed it. But anyway, yeah, like I said, it turned out that it wasn't a robbery like I had initially thought. Apparently, Savalas and his men were sent by the government to take over the investigation of the murders on the train. And it goes pretty well, actually, with a little help from Saxton dimming the lights. This makes sense in context. The inspector manages to get away, with the priest, now completely mad, following him, though not before Telly Savalas puts a throwing knife and 2 bullets into the inspector's back. The creature moves into the priest, and the priest manages to cut the lights, allowing him to ambush and take out Savalas' men. He does seem able to kill them faster than he'd killed anyone else in the movie, but we can allow for some dramatic license here. Besides, it's entirely possible that he simply just doesn't take all of their memories before moving on to the next victim, allowing him to go through them more quickly. This idea is bolstered by the priest taking longer to kill Telly Savalas once Savalas is the last man standing. The priest then goes on to kill the Scandinavian woman's husband, and almost gets her too, before Saxton shows up with a bright light and a rifle. Again, makes sense in context. At this point, the priest reveals that he, or rather the creature now residing in him, but I'm just going to call him the priest for simplicity's sake, is from another galaxy and was actually left behind by accident rather than crashed on Earth, and that he survived in life forms on Earth for millions of years. There's actually some stuff earlier in the movie that lends credibility to this claim, but the point is he uses the knowledge he has gained in a lifetime about as long as anything more complex than amoebas have existed on Earth as a bargaining chip, appealing to Saxton's scientific and historic curiosity to convince Saxton to let him go. When that doesn't work, the priest closes his eyes and starts swaying, and then everyone he's killed while in the priest's body gets back up. That can't be good. Saxton and the Scandinavian woman are able to get away after a bit of a tussle with the now undead minions of the priest that sadly mostly takes place in the dark, but it is nighttime and the priests cut the power to the lights, so what can you do? Wells, after having herded all the surviving passengers to the baggage car, starts to uncouple it from the rest of the train, only just getting started when Saxton and the Scandinavian show up, with the priest's zombie army slowly coming up behind them. They manage to disconnect, and just in time, too, as a telegram reaches what would have been the train's next stop, and they are ordered to divert it onto an unfinished track which would send the whole thing over a cliff. Seems a bit drastic, since as far as Moscow knew, all they were dealing with was one murderer on the train. But, okay. Maybe there's a missing scene somewhere. But yeah, the creature is dead now. The end. Or is it? Nah, it is. There's no sequel bait here. Or actually much of anything after the last frame. The closing credit music plays, but the only thing on the screen is blackness and some film scratches. But no sign of the actual credits. What the hell? Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. Not sure what happened, but the film transfer was really bad during the opening credits. Mercifully, the whole movie wasn't like this, though it wasn't exactly crystal clear either. Though really, that's been the norm for this set so far. This movie has some really good uses of shadow. Hopefully at least one of the screen caps I find on Google Images will reflect that. Oh, by the way, I honestly don't know if the dog survived or not. Sorry. Final verdict. A fun movie, though the vampire connection is tenuous at best. Pretty sure I've used that exact phrasing for a few other movies in this set, but what can you do? Honestly, I'm wondering if the team that assembled this at Mill Creek, and frankly I'm being generous in assuming that it was a team, they just saw that it was a Cushing and Lee film and figured that was good enough. That said, this is a solid little monster movie, with effects that aren't bad at all for 1972, and even a few legit laughs thrown in. And I also appreciate how no one in this movie acts like a total idiot to move the plot along. Yes, sometimes the characters leap to conclusions that are only correct because the script says so, but hell, lots of movies more well-known than this one get away with it, and manage to be super popular. Like the first Independence Day, for instance. So with that, we move on to the fourth and final disc of this Mill Creek set, with the next episode, a movie called The Werewolf vs. the Vampire Women. With a title like that, there's really only two ways it can go. Either so bad it's good, or I am too sober to be watching this.